I'm really excited to see how she does.
That's exciting.
Yeah, I mean,
I've got so much energy.
there you go.
Okay, now you're in.
Good evening, Rolling Meadows. This is the January 15th, 2019 Committee of the Whole meeting beginning at 7:30 p.m. We will have 6 members present. Mr. Gallo is ill tonight and will not be joining us. I believe, Chief, you are first up.
Good evening, everyone. Mayor, Alderman, thank you for this opportunity. I know there's a lot of items on the agenda today, so I will make this brief, but I really just want to give you a progress report of our newly formed K-9 unit. It's hard to believe it's just been a little over a year. I was actually right at this podium asking for all your support and your permission to implement a K-9 unit for this police department, and I do thank you for giving me that permission and allowing me to move forward to that. So that's sort of what I'm here for today. And one of the 3 reasons why I wanted, and I thought it was important really to have a K-9 unit here in Rolling Meadows was, one, really is to improve the police service we could provide to the residents of Rolling Meadows. Second was also to increase officer safety. And third was to improve our police and public interactions, basically public relations. And I thought the K-9 unit could do that. And I'm happy to say with just like I said, a little over a year, I believe we've been really successful in accomplishing those 3 goals. And I do want to remind the council that we did that really at a neutral cost to the taxpayers. All the funds to purchase K-9 SCAR, purchase the vehicle, the training, all the equipment was really arised from asset seizure funds, really from money taken away from criminals fund this program. We were also successful in a couple of grants, like K-9 SCAR is sporting his bulletproof vest. That was actually given to us by Vested Interest. It's a non-profit group. I was actually received an email just a couple hours ago, and SCAR actually was awarded free health insurance. So I mean, I wish I had free health insurance. And that was also through Vested Interest, which supplies equipment for working law enforcement dogs. So we're really happy also to receive that. I do have just a brief PowerPoint, and I do have Officer Don here if you have any questions specific regarding the K-9 unit. Actually, I just want to highlight some of the activities in the last year. Start out, K-9 SCAR Officer Don has been on about 150 K-9 specific incidents. Those range from searching cars for narcotics, searching buildings, tracking offenders, trying to locate missing children, adults, and so forth. So about 148 K-9 specific calls of service. Officer Don, not K-9 SCAR, has issued 51 citations, mainly for possession of drug paraphernalia and small amounts of cannabis, totaling over $5,000 in fines, seized about $6,000 of money from drug dealers. That also goes back into the asset forfeiture fund, which continues to run this program, like I said, at a neutral cost to the taxpayers. They removed about 1,000 grams of illegal narcotics from the community. They participated in about almost 300 hours of training, and they searched about a dozen schools, and like I said, keeping the schools safe and removing drugs from those schools to keep them so kids can learn. One of the other things too, we also assisted 23 other law enforcement agencies. For years, Rolling Meadows did not have its own K-9 unit, so we had to rely on other departments for K-9 assistance. And it's nice at this point in time that we're actually able to repay that favor and help some of our neighbors, such as Arlington Heights and Palatine and so forth. So we're very happy about that. Also, like I said, community relations, public relations, one of the goals we had. K-9 SCAR has been about over a dozen of our community events. I know I've seen you all there, and you could contest that SCAR is very popular, and usually there's a big group of people around him. And what that does is a lot of people actually come up and start conversation with us because they're interested on the police K-9. And so we're able to start a conversation that maybe we normally wouldn't have, building relationships and so forth with the public. So that's been a big success. And as I promised you, I'd be very brief. Any questions?
Council, any questions for anybody?
No, that was simple. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
There you go, Star.
There we go. All right.
Way done.
He wants to stay for the city council meeting. I think that's amazing. All right. Mr. Crumstock, and I believe Ms. Gallagher, we're up to the 2018 bonds update, please.
Thank you very much, Mayor and City Council. Obviously, with Finance Director Melissa Gallagher, we also have Robert Rushlicki from Ken McKenna to go over, obviously, the summary of our 2018 bonds, and actually number 3 will allude to, which is our 2019 bond sales. But with that, we do turn it over to Finance Director Melissa Gallagher for the 2018 bond update.
Thank you, Mr. Crumstock. Mayor, City Council, tonight, as Mr. Crumstock mentioned, we are going to give a quick, brief update on the 2018 bonds and how they turned out. And before I turn it over to Bob Richlicki of King McKenna Capital, I wanted to just briefly give you a few pointers and information. As a follow-up from the October 16th Committee of the Whole meeting from the city's budget process, the city did achieve an excellent bond issuance that closed on December the 18th. Bob Richlicki is going to go through the particulars on that, but I did want to mention that the bonds were issued at a $9.5 million par balance, which it covers the fire station expenditures. And then there will be a second presentation after this that will show you the upcoming 2019 bond issuance. I want to turn over to Bob Richlicki and to go through the summary report, which is included in your packet, just as a reminder, too, that the commitments that we've made in 2018 do follow through in 2019 for the bond issuance, and also to the fact that we have the Standard & Poor's rating summary from the credit rating report, and we also have King McKenna's summary report for the bond issuance. With that, here's Bob.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Good to see you. Happy New Year. From the standpoint of the 2018 bonds, when we went in before the council, and then we went in before Standard & Poor's, we basically had a story to tell to S&P, and I think they affirmed the story not only through the affirmation of the AA+ rating that the city had, but also confirmed a stable outlook. And that stable outlook was put in play by the analysts who looked at a lot of information, not only as it related to this bond issue, but also the future bond issue as it related for completion of both the fire station and the infrastructure work. So both of them were part of the same story that we had to Standard & Poor's in November. And at this point, really, the Standard & Poor's rating is important. I think partly because, again, it affects your interest rate, but also the interest in the city. I think there were 34 subscribers, through the underwriting that was put together by Bernardi, one of which included BMO Harris, a local bank, had subscribed, I think, to about $1,445,000 in terms of bonds for the purchase. And again, the city's name, I believe, given the interest that you had, and they were oversubscribed. There were, purchasers that were not able to get in on the bandwagon, so to speak. But again, we look forward to, again, through the next sale, that we got that interest in the city through not only the rating reaffirmation, but the fact that we might come back into the market. From an economic standpoint, there were targets that we were looking at, both in terms of the net interest rate and the, the cost per year. Those were achieved. I think, our true interest cost, which is determination of what your interest payments would be, again, less any cost of issuance, that was calculated to be 3.48, which was in the band that we had talked about in October. The average levy or debt service amount was a little under $700,000 per year. And we were also on budget as it related to all the cost of issuance. I mean, all the providers came in at the amounts pursuant to the contractual agreements that the city approved. We also, because of the market and the way we were in the market, there was about $450,000 of premium bonds, which basically added to the city's project fund over and above the $9.5 million. Again, at basically the same rates, but because of a window in the market where there was concern possibly over rising interest rates in the future and the fact that these were tax-exempt bonds. So you get this phenomenon where sometimes the bonds are sold at a premium because that protects the investors in terms of tax exemption in the event that the rates go up in the future in the secondary market. So, overall, we felt that, again, from the parameters that had been discussed with the city and what the hope was as we went into the marketplace, that those were achieved, both from an interest rate standpoint in terms of the net proceeds and the ability to close by the end of the year, I think, in terms of the timetable. And most importantly, again, the city's rating was reaffirmed as it related to the AA+, and there was good interest in the marketplace as it related to the investors who subscribed to the issue. And again, if there are any questions, we'd be glad to try to answer them.
Anyone have any questions for Bob or staff?
I have a question for staff.
Yes, Mr. Cannon,
So
sir.
this is for staff, because how much are we asking for in this bond? Is this 8.5 or 7.5?
9.5.
So
Well, no,
in our
we
20...
just did 9.5, didn't we?
Yeah, that's number 3, and we're going to be asking for 8.5.
So what are we doing with the extra million? We were told 17, 17, 17, and now it's 18.
Well,
But that's,
part of that is with the issuance costs and...
Part of it is the issuance costs, and then also there's a buffer in there too for unforeseen project expenditures. But most of it is what we have been saying, around 17 million between the two issuances. We just want to make sure that there is a cushion. We were going to get into the next steps after this, after we close out on the discussion from 2018.
Okay, so when we do issue the second round of bonds, are we going to be able to get them called so when we sell property, we can pay down the debt off of that so it doesn't go into the general fund?
I'll turn that over to Mr. Crumstock in terms of...
do you want to finish this first one? And I think we should finish.
Oh, okay, that's fine, whatever.
Because you're jumping to the next one. So is there any questions on the 2018 bond update? Seeing none. Well, okay, let's move on to the 2019 bond update, please.
Well, I can kick that off and turn it back over to Mr. Crumstock to address Mr. Cannon's question. First off, I did want to close up as far as to kick it off for 2019 bonds. At the January 22nd City Council meeting, we are going to be presenting the bond ordinance for the second issuance of debt, and I'll get into that in a moment. But then there will be 2 budget resolutions as well. One would be to adopt the actual 2018 bond debt service payments, and the second one would be for the $2.1 million repayment back to the general fund, and that was noted in the 2018 write-up. I just wanted to make sure that was put out there. For 2019 next steps in the packet, we have been working with our professional service providers over the last couple weeks, and our financial advisor, Kay McKenna, Bob is here tonight as well, and bond counsel on the 2019 bond issuance. As Mr. Richlicki has mentioned, the interest rate environment is optimal right now, and given the fact that we've got the guaranteed maximum price coming up for the Hicks Road Fire Station 16 at the January 22nd, the bond ordinance is being drafted right now from bond counsel. I believe we received it today, and this would be the first reading to take place on January 22nd. The planned project is to issue $8.5 million, as mentioned, to cover the remainder of the expenses for 2340 Hicks Road, the second Fire Station 16, and then for utilities, capital infrastructure, underground utilities, split between the two. When we drafted our official statement and also met with our credit rating agency, Standard & Poor's, we outlined the 2-year project plan, which is also documented in our 2019 budget as well. And so the estimated timetable is somewhere around March. We would successfully meet with our credit rating agency again, go through the process, and then issue debt in March, closing to take place in March. So if you want, turn it back over to Mr.
So
Mayor.
just to continuing in the line that you were asking about, so with the $4 million that we've always been talking about for the infrastructure, specifically water mains, when you looked at that, that's really to hopefully help us on rate stabilization for a period of time. But the other question that you have, even with the 2018, we do have certain years that we have calls that we can, obviously, when we sell the property, that we can reduce some of our numbers. And that was one thing that when we worked with Ken McKenna and in our bond council that we wanted specific calls. And each one of those, when you go out to the market, that could cost you a little bit, but we wanted to make sure that these were fluid enough at certain points in time that once we did sell property and we did have that money, that it would be utilized to pay off the bonds, or potentially utilized for the bonds to be paid off. So typically what would happen is the property would be sold, and come in, and just like how we do with uncompensated absences, that we restrict the money, we would restrict the money until that call year comes up. And again, it is staged on certain years that we have calls that we can deal with that. But that's how we have structured the 2018, and that's also how we've structured the 2019, that at later dates we can call those and actually pay those down with additional money.
How soon would be the first time we could call? About?
We structured it, good question. We structured it, I believe, 7, 8, and 9, but I think we ended up at 8-year call, 8, 9, and 10-year call.
So we can't pay them down until the 8th year?
That's the first call
That would
that
be
we
the first
actually
call.
add.
So are we going to put the money to the side then for the 8 years?
Just like I said, if the property is sold, what we would do is we would restrict the money, so it just sits there and it's going to have its own interest. And then when that year is able to be called, that's when we're able to contribute that money into it.
Okay. So out of the 2 bonds then, so the total will be closer to 18 million. How much of that are we actually going to net then? How much are we actually paying for cost out of the whole total? About. I don't need to get an exact number, but just ballpark.
The 2018 bonds had a 1.2% issuance cost for about $120,000,
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then so you're guessing it'll be a little bit less than that for the next bond?
a little bit less than that, yes.
So that would be, so why are we, but I still don't understand, so why are we going for 18 million? Why aren't we going for 17.5?
One of the reasons that we're looking at this, again, is we're still finalizing the guaranteed maximum price for the fire stations. And given the fact that we were at about 13 million, it's somewhere about that, we want to make sure that we're covered for the issuance for the fire station costs completely. We're at about 13.5 million, somewhere about there, and we'll provide that final estimate through the guaranteed maximum price to give you that full picture. But when you issue debt, you want to make sure that you're covering all your costs. So some of that has been accounted for in the fire station project, but also remember that when Public Works presented the underground utilities projects, it was about 4.6 million, thereabouts, with all of the engineering costs, all the design, all the construction engineering. We want to make sure we're covering all the costs of the project. We did say that we were going to go out to bid and make sure that we're getting the best price possible for the lowest responsible bidder, but at the same point, we're just trying to make sure we have a cushion there. And that was kind of our thought process when we're talking to bond counsel as well.
In fact, they asked about that.
Yeah, you want to come up and talk a little bit about that?
Bob, if you just step up to the mic,
Yes,
please.
sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah, in fact, when we went over this with bond counsel, there are folks who put together the enabling legislation, so to speak. One of their first questions was, we want to make sure, because it's an up to number, that you'd have the flexibility in the event that we had to make a change. So,
Thank you. Mr. Cannon, does that
Thank
answer all
you.
your questions?
Thank you.
Are there further questions from the council on the 2019 bonds? Mr. Budmetz, sir, was that a?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So on the 2019 bonds, would we have to spend that money in 2019?
How it typically works is we've got about a 24-month spend down. 36. I keep 24 months in my mind just because I want to make sure that we are accountable and making sure.
Did I say 36? I meant 24.
Typically, the last dollar you have to is 36. We keep 24 months in our mind just to make sure that we're on track.
Now, so we don't fall into arbitrage.
Right, and that's the other thing that we're monitoring through PMA Investments, who we've signed off as far as our investment consultant for the bonds. Now that we have our arbitrage number, we track that now. We track it monthly, actually. So to Bob's point, 36, but also 24 in our mind as well. Our bond counsel will tell us 24 sometimes, too.
So if we were extraordinarily lucky and the GMP was much less than 13.5 million for purpose of conversation, then if we had $2 million extra to spend, would we be required to spend it on fire station things, or we can spend it on whatever we want? We're not.
So
We're not,
how we
it's not
have,
like a designated.
yeah, so
fund.
how we have it designated is, it talks about capital improvements, specifically underground utilities and some of those other pieces. So if there is money left over, then it would be utilized for underground utilities.
Or we can choose not to borrow it and not to spend it. Is that correct?
You could say that, but it's already in hand at that point in time once you're thinking at that number.
Oh, I'm sorry, I misunderstood what Bob's comment was, up to 8.5 million? So that means we don't have to ask for the whole 8.5, or I'm not understanding fully then.
The plan right now is presented to City Council tonight in the packet. We are estimating the par value of 8.5 million, and that's what we're discussing tonight, given the fact that we still have the remaining expenditures for the fire stations, and then we also have the underground utilities as proposed for rate stabilization and overall capital improvements. And so, to your point, is whether or not you're to spend that, once you firmly say we are going through with our bond ordinance, which is our first reading on January 22nd, the second reading would take February 12th, you are effectively saying we are going to issue debt for 8.5 million.
Okay.
And to that point too, that's why we're discussing these items tonight and showing the entire project plan throughout the process.
Thank you. Mr. Budmetz?
When we had the October council, the whole meeting, we talked about the idea of bond issuance and those but that was for informational purposes. I don't recall voting on that. And so are those $4 million, are those in fact what we're doing, or we're not voting on that at all? So I understand. It was proposed as informational only. There was no straw vote or anything, so I don't know, are those projects then aligned and we're just doing that, or are we discussing that or deciding that at the upcoming meeting?
So in December, we also presented a project plan in terms of underground utilities. There were three main projects, water mains. One of those were Arbor Drive, and the other two are also water main projects. And some of those things were discussed with City Council to see whether or not a straw poll was not taken, I believe, that night. But that was the entire project plan in terms of the utility rate study being done. We talked about this through the bond and budget process, that at some point we would come back to City Council for a discussion on underground utilities and going out to the market for purposes of funding those capital infrastructure improvement projects.
So
with the second issuance of debt. It was also discussed through the budget process for 2019. And then in December, when we were talking about the utility rate study and looking at those as far as making sure we're funding those capital infrastructure project improvements, going out to the rate environment right now is optimal, and given the fact that we're going out for fire stations too.
And so that discussion will happen next week? Is that basically the idea?
So January 22nd, as I've mentioned, we've got first reading for a bond ordinance. And that would be for the remaining expenditures, as we're outlining tonight as well, for the fire station projects, for the underground utilities, for utilities fund, for water mains.
Okay.
Further questions from members of the council? Seeing none, thank you, Ms. Gallagher.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
And Bob, thank you for coming to visit. It's always a slice to talk with you. I just want you to know
It's always a
that.
pleasure to come to the city. Thanks very much. We appreciate your continued participation with our firm, and we look forward to the next issue.
And I know more about bonds now than I ever cared to know about after our
You have to
meetings.
take an aspirin later, so.
Thank you. Now I'll just talk to Mr. Williams. This brings us up to number 4, which is our increase the age to purchase tobacco, electronic cigarettes products from 18 to 21. Mr. Crumstock?
Thank you very much, Mayor and City Council. Obviously, what's before you and is to take the city code, and there is the draft ordinance that's all prepared, but it does take our city code and make the age to purchase, in addition to sell and delivery in the city of Rolling Meadows for tobacco, electronic cigarettes from the age of 18 to 21. Obviously, there's roughly 30 communities and 1 county who've actually taken this step already before us, and the city of Des Plaines will be taking this up next Tuesday. Obviously, if you look back in 2018, the state legislators actually talked about this. It did get to Governor Rauner's table. It was vetoed, and the veto stood. So it probably will be coming back up for the legislators. But as other municipalities have done, this is setting the stage and actually part of the discussion that we're having. So part of those communities around us that have actually approved this already are Barrington, Arlington Heights, Elk Grove Village, Hoffman Estates, Lincolnshire, Vernon Hills. It's Lake Zurich, not Lac Zurich, in the type-up, and Buffalo Grove. So again, what you have before you is a discussion that we hope that you will have, and the draft ordinances before you to take our city code to make, again, the purchase in addition to sale and delivery from the age of 18 to 21. I would make the footnote that the City of Rolling Meadows ordinance does not delve into some of these other municipalities have talked about if you had possession. There is no possession about it. It only talks about purchase, sale, and delivery in the ordinance. So be aware. Obviously, this has gone through City Attorney Jim McCall review. He drafted the draft ordinance, so I guess that's a double draft before you for the discussion. But that's what you have before you. We do need a straw vote on this to move it ahead from 18 to 21. The City of Rolling Meadows TIP committee does know that we're having this conversation. Many of you know Dr. Goyle, due to some family items.
Yes.
He could not be here, but he does support moving it from 18 to 21. And I know that the mayor has met with Chris Zerfas,
Yes.
who actually was one of the individuals who has discussed with other municipalities.
Well, I thank you for bringing this forward because I think it was, I don't know, September or October, I asked staff to start working on this to bring this forward because I was meeting with various groups, and there's actually a high school group of students that are coming out and giving presentations to increase this. And I know that on more than one occasion, I said, "Hey, Jim, how's it coming?" And Jim says, "Well, it's on my stack of things to get done." I think it's something that we need to move forward with. And yes, I've had conversations with surrounding mayors, and I will be at a legislative meeting next week with surrounding mayors and legislators to discuss how this is, especially the electronic cigarettes and what effect that's having in our state. So if there's nothing further, Mr. Crumstock, I'll open up for questions from council. Mr. Cannon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You know, I see the write-up, but I mean, why is there such a big push to change this? Is something going on that we're not aware of? I'm not against this, but I don't know if I'm for it either. I mean, 18-year-olds can vote, right? Mm-hmm. They can go in the service. Mm-hmm. They can do a lot of things. I'm just confused why there's such a big push to switch to 21. I guess I'd like a little bit of background on why we're going there.
There is a more formal presentation we can bring forward, but the issue that they're having in schools, even down into the junior high level, is the electronic cigarettes and the availability of being able to purchase them. And plus the fact is they now can purchase tobacco, cannabis, and other things online. So what we're looking at is to move it up to 21. And I agree with you, at 18 they have many privileges, but this is the direction we're going to see what we can do, because it's becoming a major problem, I can tell you, in many areas, that this is so readily available. So that's why the surrounding areas, and when I speak with mayors and I speak with our legislators, that's why there's the push for 21.
Could you expand on what you mean by problems? I mean, you talked about junior high. I mean, junior high is, I hope a kid isn't in junior high at 18 still.
No, but what you have is individuals who are 18 that can go and purchase this, and then they can sell it back on the street, so to speak. And so we have what we're seeing from the meetings I've gone to and the conversations I've had is there's younger students are now having the opportunity to have access to these electronic cigarettes. So as a result, in regard to, we realize it's not a catch-all to solve the entire problem, but by raising it to 21, we hope to have more and a better regulation on it. So, Mr. Cannon.
So I was wondering, have we just polled any of the people in town that sell these products, what their position is on it? How it's going to affect their income or anything?
No, we have not.
Okay. I'm still a little bit confused, but thanks for the answers.
Thank you. Other questions? Mr. Diastis.
I'm not knowledgeable about these electronic cigarette products. I was talking with an individual I work with, and he says he has this electronic cigarette product thing, but it does not contain nicotine. So it's not a tobacco product. It's a flavored liquid. I don't know what the liquid is, water or whatever. It smells like strawberries or lemons or limes or whatever the case is. Is that also covered on here? Because as I read through here, a lot of it said tobacco, but I don't know if it includes the non-tobacco liquid or the non-nicotine.
Mr. McCall, because we're basically looking at the instrument.
If you look at the proposed ordinance on page 2 of the ordinance, it talks about a definition of tobacco products, and it talks about tobacco products being excuse me. It talks about electronic. It talks about electronic cigarettes, but it talks about It talks about tobacco products, and defines those tobacco products. If you're talking about the vaporizer, that's included within electronic cigarettes. So it's a heating device or other mechanism that vaporizes a liquid solution. So it would include those. But it also talks about electronic cigarette, including devices known as personal vaporizers or electronic nicotine delivery systems. So it really wouldn't include. I think what you're referring to is like a vapor substance that does not contain nicotine.
Correct.
And I don't think, and I'd be happy to go through it again, but I don't think that would be inclusive of this particular ordinance.
Okay, that was my question, since I met somebody who has one of these things. It does not deliver nicotine. And I asked the guy, I said, well, if it doesn't give you nicotine because you quit smoking, what does it do for you? He goes, well, it just gives me a chance to take a break and clear my head. I'm like, okay, so there's no nicotine, there's no tobacco, there's no nothing in there, and this ordinance does not cover that.
No,
correct?
I don't believe it does. I'll double check, and I apologize.
Okay, no,
because I haven't read it in a while, and I was
okay.
slow in getting back through it this evening.
I'm just asking the question because then my question would be, if it doesn't contain nicotine and it's not a tobacco type thing, how do we enforce it when you see somebody with one of these personal vapor, whatever, cigarette thingies? How do we enforce it? How do we know it's got nicotine or not in it? So I'm just asking the question because I don't know.
I didn't mean to interrupt you.
That's okay.
I think that the devices are pretty easily discernible to anyone who knows.
Okay.
And the vapor devices are, as I understand it, and that's a loose understanding, are different than a device that'll deliver nicotine.
I don't know. I guess before I voted on this, I'd like to get more clarification because, again, I'm talking to one person who I just talked to him, last week about this. I was like, why do you do this? But he says, well, sometimes I put the liquid with nicotine in here.
You could do that too.
So I'm like, okay, so how do you know if the liquid's got nicotine and it's a tobacco thing, which this covers, or it's just some strawberry flavored water or whatever it is? I mean, how do you know at that point?
But I think the distinction here is that this ordinance is not geared towards possession. It's geared towards the sale. And whoever's selling these products should know whether or not it contains nicotine.
Okay.
The purpose was not to impose a penalty on possession, because we
Okay.
can't, if it's legal in one community for an 18-year-old to possess cigarettes, or whatever, and drives through Rolling Meadows to go to some other community.
Right.
You know, you don't, you're
Okay, so
not going to arrest
it's
him for
just-
that, so.
It's just the selling of.
Correct.
Not the possession of. So,
Correct.
some 18-year-old who lives in Rolling Meadows could go to Palatine, buy cigarettes, come back here and smoke them on the corner, and it's fine.
Correct.
Okay.
So I should have brought out that distinction earlier on.
Okay.
And so I apologize for having to
That's
reread
okay.
the ordinance that I drafted, but that was the purpose.
Thank you. Jenkins?
Thank you. When I was reading through this, Alderman Diaz asking about the nicotine and the vapor and stuff, I did notice in Section 2, Paragraph A, it does state also, though, that as or alternative nicotine product. So aren't these vapors that don't have nicotine an alternative to the nicotine ones? I would just ask that we check that. Because again, I don't know, to me, that reads that, okay, any vapor,
Yeah, I
then
guess
that,
it could.
whether that's an alternative to the nicotine.
Yeah, I guess so.
So that, I would just, the
I saw
clarification
that,
of
but I
that.
wasn't sure.
Yeah,
Further
that's
question?
all.
I have one.
Yes, Mr. Bud Matts.
So, it's after passage, it's a crime, what is the penalty for such an offense? There's nothing described.
It would just be a municipal ordinance violation, subject to a penalty of, typically anywhere from a fine of, $50 to $750.
We don't need to know that before we pass this, what we're gonna,
Well, it's a generic fine. It would be up to,
Adjudicator.
an adjudicator or a court to actually determine the fine. But again, the fine would be on the seller of the product. It wouldn't be on the person who's in possession.
so then it's not against the law for somebody to purchase it? What's the fine to purchase it?
Well, it would be a penalty to purchase it or falsify your identification or to prove your age that would say you were qualified to purchase it.
Okay, I guess what I'm trying to ask is if a kid goes into a store, are they gonna, and they try to purchase it, not knowing that, not even trying to misrepresent their age, what kind of a fine are they subject to for immediately saying the words, "I'd like to purchase a pack of cigarettes"?
Well, if given the confines of that question, they would not be subject to any fine whatsoever because they haven't purchased it, they haven't falsified their identification, they have not produced anything that would falsify their identification, and it would be up to the person who sells it, if in fact they choose to sell it to that person, that they would be subject to a fine.
Okay.
Yes, Mr. Jenkins.
Thank you. Just from someone I know, when you go into a lot of gas stations, liquor stores and all that stuff, there are signs now that say, 35 and under, we card for cigarettes, tobacco products and stuff. I knew someone that had worked at like a Quick Mart gas station, mini mart thing, and they did not ask for an ID on someone, and the penalty came upon them. They received a citation and stuff, and then it was determined what that was. It wasn't set by us or the ordinance. It was set through, the ticketing and then going to the arbitration of the court. So just
Right.
from an experience I had heard about.
Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Banger.
And if I'm not mistaken, I think our police department does fairly routine stings on our shops in town. So I'm sure that would happen if we raised this. I guess as an aside, or specifically these vapors, I've heard nothing but bad about them. I've heard they've flooded schools from grade school up. Kids can be very deceptive with them because they don't actually emit smoke, and so they can vape away during the school day. I've got a couple educators that were around the table during the holidays, and at some of their schools they've locked the bathrooms and give hall passes now for bathrooms. So no mass bathroom breaks in between classes. You go to class, if you need to go to the bathroom, get a hall pass, because the kids congregate in the bathrooms and vape way in between classes. So I know it's a big problem. I wouldn't have any problem supporting this. Thanks.
Thank you. Further question for clarification? It's now time to open the floor. We do have one signatory to address this, Linda Ballantyne. The council meeting is now open to the audience for 20 minutes to address the city council of matters that are on the agenda only. We ask that persons wishing to address the city council keep their comments to 5 minutes in length. Comments must be addressed to the council as a whole through the mayor, and profanity may not be used in any form. Ms. Ballantyne?
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, council members. I'm Linda Ballantyne, but I am not here for the Chamber of Commerce. I'm not here as a resident. I'm actually here on behalf of Dr. Arvind Goyal, Chairman of the TIPS Committee, which is the Tobacco Information Prevention Program, which I also sit on. He regrets that he could not be in attendance this evening. His younger daughter in Florida is having her baby today, so he and his wife flew out so that they could be there for the birth of their new grandchild. He is asking if the final approval of the ordinance change, because he wasn't sure when that would happen, if it could be delayed to January 29th so that the committee could meet to review and discuss the ordinance change and engage with other organizations like the American Heart Association, the American Lung Association, and possibly also the American Cancer Association for their input and possible suggestions and recommendations to add to the ordinance beyond the TIP committee. So that is why I am here this evening, is to ask if that would be possible, that if you go through a first and second reading, if that second reading could be delayed till the end of January to give us enough opportunity to meet as a committee and to engage with these other organizations to see if they have any input or recommendation that they may want to give to the committee that we could then give to the council in regard to this ordinance change.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Ballantyne. That now closes the floor to the audience. Do we have any other discussion, Ms. Mayor? Yes.
Can I just do one clarification? So our next city council meeting is on January 22nd. January 29th would be the fifth Tuesday of the month, so we do not have a meeting. And then February 12th is actually the next city council meeting. So just for clarification on that.
Thank you. So I gather what we're looking for is either, we'll start off is, I've heard clarification, so I guess we'll start off with a straw vote if who would like to move forward with this ordinance as written tonight. Can I have a show of hands? We have 3 opposed. Well, I have 3 opposed. I gather we have failed.
I thought we were looking for clarification on the vape thing.
Correct. So I'm asking if you, so that my next question is, if you don't want to move it forward, a straw vote for staff to come back with clarification on the vaping and the questions that were asked tonight. All in favor of that? We have, how many? Could I see your hands again? 1, 2, 3. So we all.
Don't we have?
Can I
Since we
just...
don't, we're, yes.
Yeah, so obviously with this being a 3-3 on both sides, staff working with the city attorney, we could actually get that clarification, and remember that this is an ordinance, so it has 2 readings, so hopefully by the first reading next week, the 22nd, we might have that, and then by February 12th, we will definitely have that for the second reading, so we keep it moving along, but it also depends on city attorney. But if vaping and liquids are the only question, I'm sure we can get that clarification definitely by the second reading, but that's just a suggestion.
And then you could, if anyone on the council has questions, they can, or wants particular questions on clarification, please send them to Barry and Jim McCall. So.
But that would be my recommendation if you take a straw vote on that one.
Yeah. So we're going to move, so basically, a straw vote to move forward with the recommendation that was made by staff. Are we in favor of that? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? Okay, thank you. Opposed?
I just have a final question, if I may.
Sure, starts to the S's.
Thank you. This is kind of what's throwing me off. Alternative nicotine product is a product or device not consisting of or containing tobacco that provides for the ingestion into the body of nicotine, whether by smoking, chewing, blah, 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 blah. So if this device is a vaping device and you can put a liquid in there that has nicotine, then it's right. And if the store sells it to somebody under 21, they can be fined. But if this same device can be used with a product that does not contain nicotine, then you can't cite the store because the product can go with nicotine or without. And according to this, it says you have to be able to ingest nicotine. That's right, whether we, for purchase or not, if you could buy the same thing and it can do either one or the other, whether we do a sting or not, how do you say the seller is wrong? Because he says, well, it doesn't do nicotine, but it does. So I'm for this. I just want to make sure that this is clear so that we don't get caught in the switches later on.
Okay. So I think Mr. McCall,
does that make sense?
Noted for what we're looking for?
Yeah.
Okay.
If I may,
I'm sorry, Mr. Budmetz, did you be recognized?
We have a vape shop here on Kirchhoff, so maybe we can depend on their expertise as to, so that
we actually have several, but
I'm just, so if we may, to depend on their expertise so that we write an ordinance that's
enforceable
and current, yeah.
Okay. Yes, Mr.
Just one thing. I think that we kind of lose sight of the fact here that this is not against the people that are buying. This law is not necessarily against the people that are buying. It's against the people that are selling.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And if you make the vaping device illegal for anybody under 21, they cannot sell it to anybody under 21. That's what we're after. As I understand it from all of the definitions of things and everything else that I've read here, is that, kids are, beer's illegal too, but they still try and get it. But the problem is when you sell it. Mm-hmm. We're after the seller, not the buyer.
So, okay. Thank you, Mr. Williams. I think we've provided enough information for staff. All right. We now move on to number 5, which is Sunset Brookview Sanitary Sewer Improvement Update.
Obviously, Public Works Director Fred Vogt is coming up. We have another update from this. We do appreciate all the time that Alderman Cannon has spent with this project. He's also gone out and got us some surveys that we're still lingering. But at the end of the presentation, if you look at your summary section, we do have some questions that we do need straw votes on as we continue working on this project. With that, I do turn it over to Public Works Director Fred Vogt.
Thank you, Mr. Vogt. Sir.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Barry. I've been here many times talking about Sunset Drive in Brookview. Sanitary sewers, more than I can count, but we are getting to the point where I think we can decide whether to move forward with this project or not based on the fact we've had 3 public information meetings for residents in the last year and a half. The most recent was in October. We committed at that meeting to put a comprehensive survey together for the residents. We sent out 22 of those in late November. The number 22 is key because there are potentially 22 properties that could benefit from a sanitary sewer improvement in the area. But 2 of those, one at each end of the potential project, does have an alternative to use an existing sewer on Old Plum Grove Road. We don't know whether that will cost them more, cost them less, but that is reflected in the project. Potentially, there would probably be 20 properties that would be affected if a project such as this moved forward. Unless those other 2 opted to be included, we would exclude them. Just to go through the some of the responses that we tabulated, and we did get 18 of the 22 mailings received over the past several weeks. 11 of them are supportive of the project, some with conditions. Actually, that's 12 because I just heard from someone over the weekend. 6 of the responses are not supportive of the project. Eliminate the $7,000 connection fee that is in place. That was of considerable discussion at our public meeting. 11 would like that eliminated, 2 would not. Adding a water service options to the project and costs, that was also of considerable discussion at our public information meeting. 6 are interested in that, 6 are not interested in that. To install only the public sanitary sewer, but make homeowners responsible for their own extensions to the homes and charge the connection fee. 2 were in support of that, 5 were against it. To construct the private sanitary sewer services with the proposed project, 10 are in support of that, 2 are not supportive of it. Supporting the project if the city does not require connections, 3 are in support of that, 9 are against that. And you have to read that question carefully because that gives us indications that they support doing the connections when we do the sewer installation itself. And there's another question later that relates to that I'll get to in a minute. Are we interested in public participation if only the public sector costs are included? 6 support, 4 not supportive. Are we interested in the project only if the public and the private sector costs are included? 8 are supportive of that, 2 are not supportive. The $7,000 connection fee in place currently would keep us from supporting the project. 3 said yes, 6 said no. Should homeowners be charged an equal cost for participating in the private sector costs if we do private sector costs versus charging individually? 9 of them said yes, 2 said no. All homeowners should pay for actual private sector improvements was split. Only 6 responded, 3 yes, 3 no. And is there interest in an incentive program, whereas homeowners would have a as yet to be determined period of time to connect their private sewer to the public sewer for a discounted connection fee? 9 were interested in that, 4 were not interested in that. And several other questions that I won't go into right now that are more detailed, and some that also involve land acquisition because of us not having enough room on Sunset Drive is a separate issue. But in summary, staff feels that there's enough general support for the proposed sanitary sewer installation project at this time. Many of our discussions here at the City Council committee level was that we needed to have majority support the project. And certainly there are some conditions here that will have to be determined in the future if this project does move forward with regards to the parameters of public versus private, how we assess those costs and the like. But the first recommendation that staff has would be to seriously consider waiving the $7,000 sanitary sewer connection fee that's in place. Some background on that fee and when it was established was that that was specifically for properties that did not in any way, shape, or form financially contribute to the sanitary sewer that they would be utilizing. If this project were to go forward with a special service area, it's felt that that really is charging a homeowner twice, once for the fee that is in place as well as paying for part of the actual improvement itself. And that's really the feedback that we got from a number of homeowners in that regard. We believe that we should seriously consider putting the private sector costs out there in a project, whether it's mandatory, whether it's optional, is yet to be determined, but much of the discussion that we've had with the residents is that there would be an economy of scale to be able to bid a project such as this and get one contractor to do the work, whether we use the same contractor that did the public sewer in the street to do the private work or separated that into two contracts. It would be economically advantageous, we believe, to coordinate that, centralize that, than to have homeowners do the private sector work on their own. We feel that we could certainly add the water service cost option to the project if this does proceed. It's certainly not difficult to administer that, and excavations would take place in the same place as the private sanitary sewers. If this goes forward, we think an incentive program is a good idea to make sure that even if people are against the project, that they certainly have a financial incentive to make connection to the public sanitary sewer in a period of time. Staff just at this point is suggesting a 5-year period could be considered. Also establish equal cost distributions from an administrative standpoint, and possibly even within the confines of setting up a special service area. That probably has to be done so that it's equitable. To administer something that had differing costs would be very difficult, if not impossible, to do. Survey information also indicated that even though there was some discussion at our public meeting about potential improvements to Brookview Lane, Sunset Drive, such as storm sewers, curb and gutter, and the like, that the majority of the respondents were not interested in that. And if the public sewer goes forward, that we would then look to resurface Brookview Lane and Sunset Drive and preserve existing conditions as rural cross-section streets. Lastly, to coordinate the land acquisition process, and from a time standpoint with engineering design that has not yet been done other than on a concept basis, to minimize land acquisition actual takings or acquisition itself and the costs associated with it. We would want to only acquire right-of-way for the project to get enough of that to be able to put the sanitary sewer in. We don't necessarily need a full 33 feet on the north side of Sunset Drive at this point, but would also look at in engineering design to do tree preservations and the like. So if the mayor and council are in general agreement to support this project moving forward, we see the next steps would be in this process to work with the city attorney to develop the parameters with regards to how to proceed with a special service area, public versus private, or public and private improvements, if those could be coordinated. We would want to have another public information meeting or mailing to explain to the residents how we're setting that up. Council would then consider an ordinance to establish a special service area. This would be number 6 for the city. Please note, there is a 60-day public hearing period that would follow as part of that proposed special service area. And that's really the ultimate vote of support for property owners. If no more than, let me get this straight, if less than 50% object to the creation of a special service area, it would be created. So people would have to come to file an objection to its creation. And if we got more than 50%, then we wouldn't move forward. If we got less than 50% objecting to it, it could then move forward. The ultimate decision would be that of the city council. So that would also involve a public information meeting. So that's where this endeavor is right now. Welcome any questions, comments, discussion at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Vogt. We're going to frame this that Mr. Vogt and City Council has given us 7 items of summary that they brought forward. So we would start off with questions for clarification on the 7 points that the staff has brought forward. Are there any questions on the 7 points that have been brought forward? Was that you, Mr. Banger?
Yes, thank you. Leading up to the summary of the 7 points, I thought this was very complicated. It's an overload of information, and the numbers of the yeses and the nos on minutia, I thought clouded the issue of should we give this the go-ahead. We've talked about this several times, by the way, so I'm well acquainted with what we're dealing with, and then and the feelings of various folks over there in this relatively small stretch of street. Once you get to the summary, to me at least, and you can ask 7 questions if you want, but to me it boils down to, do we want a special service area to be established? And I would say yes, this is not something that I would feel comfortable going in and doing all of this work with all of these sanitary drops and then having a fraction of the amount of people in there, of those 22 houses, hook up to them. It'd be a waste of our time and the city's money to put all those connections in there and not have the current homeowners connect to them. I've said before, I think when these houses are sold to future owners, I would think most people in the city would opt for a sanitary hookup, which is why I always thought that this would be a popular project in the neighborhood. I've always been surprised at how many people don't want this to happen. But that's why I would support a special service area. And then if that's not going to be popular, then I say let's resurface and call it a day, and we'll lock in the status quo for the next 15 or 20 years, as long as that resurfacing takes to get to the next stage of deterioration, and then we can make a decision 15 or 20 years down the line. Do we want to do the next resurfacing and dig in the underground utilities? Because the whole point behind this all along, if I recall, has been this road is terrible. Now's the time to resurface it, and now's the time, if we want to do these underground utilities, to do the underground utilities. So if we can't get majority of people to buy into this, let's just resurface it. Otherwise, I would say do the SSA, and I'm fine waiving that the $7,000 sewer connection fee. I also like your suggestion to smooth out the costs, equal costs for each of those 22 houses through there. But in summary, for me at least, is 2 things: SSA, and if we don't get enough buy-in for that, then let's resurface this and be done with it. Thank you.
So your question for clarification is either do SSA or pave it over. Correct. Thank you.
Mayor, if I could, for Alderman Baner and others, clarify that was a primary discussion point at the most recent information meeting that we had with the residents, was that this is your chance now. If this doesn't move forward soon, in the next year or two, we're, as a city, going to have to resurface or worse the streets, and you won't get another chance for 15, 20 years because of that. So that's point well taken. Residents that were here understand that. Secondly, over the roughly 15 years that we've had periodic discussions with people in the neighborhood, we do see a lot of turnover of homeowners at this point, and I think that's what is finally being persuasive in terms of we better do this, that there are new families there that are interested in it where the previous owners were not interested in the past. Thank you.
Is there another, quote, clarification out of one of these? Because you could probably, you have it all memorized, right?
I think so. I feel like I see it in my dreams at night, or my nightmares.
So what clarification would you like to see?
I just want to make sure Mr. Bander's well aware, all the people that would come to meetings, like Fred said, are very well aware. Every meeting that we've been at, we've told them up front, this is not a threat, but if you don't do it now, it's not getting done for 20 years. Because we just, just so everybody at the table knows, the city has put a big effort behind here. Rob and Fred and our engineering people and some of our water people have gone door to door out there. So all the people, each person, whether they're for or against it, had the ability to find out exactly what was going to go on with connection and all that. So there's been a lot of work done behind the scenes. We've spent a considerable amount of money to get to this point. We've had a consultant involved. So the people are pretty aware of it. Some people are against it, just like anything else. But I mean, the people who are for it understand that in the long run, it's going to be a financial benefit for all of them. Not just, obviously, there's a cost involved for both the city and the homeowners. But anybody can tell you that they had this done in other parts of our area. It's a win-win for the homeowners. I know a lot of them. It is a financial burden. I understand that, but it's a win-win for them.
Thank you, Mr. Cannon. Mr. Budmans?
Yeah.
He's still cold.
Question?
And still his name, sir.
I didn't know if you sort of looked at me, I didn't see any motion.
I was wondering if you were reaching for it or whatever.
No, I was going to have Alderman Majakis maybe poke you to see.
No, I'm here. So the question is that I'm assuming we've done this in other neighborhoods?
Yes.
And did we waive the $7,000 fee in those neighborhoods, or are we going to be equitable amongst all the places that we've done this before?
Mr. Vogt.
I'm trying to remember a situation where we did a sanitary sewer with public involvement. We've done minimal areas. Some of the developers have done this, but that was really the crux of when the $7,000 figure was put into place, was when we did Old Plum Grove Road, as I recall. City put that line in, but didn't require the homeowners there to make the connections. And again, the sanitary sewer connection fee is established as a way to get people to, yeah, that was Brockway Street, right, Old Plum Grove Road. Recaptures have been another tool that have been used over the years to recoup money from people that connect later that didn't financially participate. The city could certainly consider that, but I think in this case, the whole understanding is that if the homeowners, property owners are going to financially participate, that's their share of the cost. And certainly as we would work with the city attorney and ultimately have the city council vote support of it or not in terms of the financials, financial details, that we should come to agreement in terms of what a fair cost is. They will be paying more than $7,000 per lot for these improvements, and to charge that connection fee when it was really set up for those that didn't participate, the way I look at it, kind of contradictory, and that's, I think, what the majority of the residents felt too.
Mr. Budmett, anything else?
I'd like to shake your hand.
Okay.
Sure.
Thank you.
Do we have other, I'm sorry. You know what? Give me a voice or something here. I mean, you know. Hi there. I'm sorry. Did you wish to be recognized, Mr. Diastis?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Diastis.
It talks about right-of-way. Is that going to be part of the costs that is distributed with the SSA? And the same for, I read in here how some people say, don't move any of my trees, don't kill any of my trees, and I understand that. So that obviously would incur additional costs if you have to run a pipe around a tree as opposed to just going straight. So are all these costs going to be a part of the SSA?
Yes. Mr. Vogt,
I'll take that, and the answer is generally yes, Alderman Diastis. I would suggest that if the city is going to outright compensate property owners for right-of-way costs, regardless of what the amount is up front, that cost should be rolled back into the total project cost. We do have at least one option to consider as we see it, which would be to, in consideration of that right-of-way being dedicated, to credit that homeowner back a certain cost for the connection itself, or discount their participation with a special service area. I can't really speak to how that would work, but that would, again, it would still be a net project cost. Right. So that answer is yes.
Well, I guess my question on that is does the city have a way to establish a cost so that for every piece of land that we acquire, the homeowner's saying, well, that's a $20,000 piece of property there for that 6 inches. Is there some established fair method, some methodology, so that we compensate the residents fairly and we don't overcompensate them fairly?
So typically what happens is we go up for appraisals on the property that we're looking. So it's an appraiser who comes back to the city council, actually city staff and the city attorney. That's what you see. So it's an appraisal done by a third party making that determination, how valuable is that property.
And their fees also get tacked into the SSA?
Typically we throw everything into the SSA.
Okay.
And if I could expand a little bit further, one of the critical elements would be to have the engineering design start relatively soon so that we can determine where we need right-of-way and how much. We've talked about the possibility of, well, what if one property owner right in the middle decides they're not going to sell or they're going to be very difficult with it? That would require the city to then look for ways to design around that, whether we put that portion of the sanitary sewer right under the street and pay more to avoid that piece of property is a consideration. We don't think we're going to have to deal with that based on discussions we've had, but you never know. And regardless of the project, land acquisition is always a big risk in terms of taking more time. Lastly, as far as trees, if we have to preserve trees and incur additional costs, that too would be subject to part of the project cost as we see it.
Mr. Diaz, do you have a follow-up question?
Yes. So, using your number of 22, is that the right number to use, or is
That's
20?
what's in the area, yes.
Okay, so if 11 say yes with SSA and yes, go ahead, do all 22 have to hook up at this point, or can the 11 hook up and the other one say, well, I'm not a part of this? How does that work? I want to make sure I understood that clearly.
Reasonably speaking, I would propose that 20 is the correct number to use for hookups because, as I said earlier, two of them certainly have the option. Unless we want to mandate that they use this particular sewer if it gets installed, they could go and use Old Plum Grove Road. So if we use the number 20, that's something that we need to decide in terms of mandating the connection and when. Hopefully we will portray this as being cost advantageous for all of those that are interested at this point, the 12, to hook up sooner rather than later. But they are all going to pay for, at minimum, the public portion of the cost. We could certainly include the laterals within the right-of-way as a cost, as another incentive to say everyone's going to pay for that. If you don't want to hook up now and take advantage of the pricing, you have to do it later, and it's going to cost you more. And at that point, you may want to say this $7,000 fee or some other fee would be appropriate because they didn't hook up when we did the project. Several different ways of looking at it, I think.
Further questions?
Well, I want to clarify. So there's 20, and 12 say okay, 8 say no. The 8 still have to pay their share of the public.
Correct.
Yeah,
But
that is
they don't
correct.
have to pay the lateral moving to their house.
That is correct. And again, going back from the beginning, so there's 22 homes that are really invited to be in it. The 2 that Fred is referring to out of the 20, they have another option, but we keep on inviting them into this because, yes, they could go into the Plum Grove one, but this is the most logical, quicker
Right, understood.
That we talk about. But yes, if you get them all in, that's a great idea. If it's not, then down the line, there is an additional
So then down the
payback.
line, they would have to pay for laterals and hookups.
That is correct.
Okay.
On their own, correct.
Thank you.
I'm done.
Mr. Cannon?
The other issue, John, it becomes an incentive for them to do it is that they have the issue with their septic systems because those will be destroyed or unhooked especially. I think destroyed, right?
Yes.
Yes.
So, I mean, if they don't do it now, the city's not going to come back and do that for them at a later date. I mean, so there's a cost advantage for them to jump in with the group. And we're not trying to punish them, but again, the group's going to do it. If they don't do it, then they're going to have to do it on their own when they want to do it and pay for it themselves.
So, any further discussion on the summary points that were brought up? Seeing none, it's move forward. Mr. Vogt, or is it, I guess staff is the 3 points that are on your agenda that Mr. Vogt brought up. We'll need a straw vote to, this is the plan and the process that you are recommending. Work with the city attorney to develop general parameters for proposed improvements in the special service area. 2 is to prepare an ordinance for consideration to propose the establishment of a special service area number 6 for public improvements. Note that a 60-day public hearing period would follow. Number 3, secure a formal cost estimate and scope of public-private improvements and establish basic financing procedures. And that's what you need to move forward with, correct?
Yes, and if council is in support of us moving forward, I staff would work with the city attorney and city manager in particular to develop this special service area parameters. I would expect that would take a few weeks, if not several weeks, to put that together, and that would be the agenda item that would come forward to council for first and second reading of an ordinance to create a special service area.
Okay. So we need a strong vote from the council to move forward with the 3 recommendations that I just mentioned. All in favor, please raise your hand. You have direction from the council.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, council.
They're not even going to let you sit down here?
No, actually.
For a few minutes, I'll be up here.
So our next
development update, and where Mr. Vogt is leading this charge on this one?
Actually, we're going to do a quick intro before we turn it over to Assistant Public Works Director Rob Horn, who's going to do that. So obviously, all of you know, back in 2017, we started having some changes, and then obviously with some additional changes, and obviously Public Works Director and the Assistant Public Works Director, and bring community development into Public Works. It's taken some time to get through some of the permitting inspections, some of the enforcement, and then obviously with some staff changes. I do want to reiterate, obviously we have a PowerPoint here that IT has already got ready, but also in the back, Don Wenzel, the Internal Services Superintendent, has been obviously with Community Development and Public Works. He starts his mornings here and then goes back to Public Works in the afternoon. And obviously, we want to talk about some of the changes with permits that we're getting ready to do. We want to talk about the overall observations that have been found, and also incorporating Public Works into, or Community Development into Public Works, and some of the streamlining that's been going on. So that's my quick intro before we have the Assistant Public Works Director, Rob Horn, come up and do a detailed PowerPoint.
Is it Mr. Vogt or Mr. Horn up next? You first.
I've just got a comment or 2 or 3 just for a moment here. Also, Elizabeth Payne is here, our Administrative Services Coordinator. Some of you may know her from the Planning and Zoning Commission work if you attend some of those meetings. But Rob and I, in particular, when we took on this endeavor starting in May of 2017, had a lot to learn. We learned a lot. We're still learning with this endeavor. There's certainly been some bumps, some negatives on the way, but far more positives that we've seen, and many more to come, as Rob will go through and explain to you in the next several minutes with the PowerPoint presentation. Just to mention, Rob in particular certainly has had a lot of community development experience in the community he worked before. Coming to Rolling Meadows, I think he had, 8 to 10 years of service, and 10 years of service working with a municipal community development department. I had a long time ago training and education in urban planning, so I certainly bring some of that with in the past couple of years in working with community development, planning and zoning, and the like. I just want to summarize and say we need to remember community development is a regulatory operation, and it doesn't always make everybody happy. We've got codes to make sure we administer, to make sure people comply with it. That sometimes is a contentious situation depending on who we're working with and what their goals and objectives are. We certainly try to be business friendly as best we can. We try to be communicative with people. We strive to be professional, reasonable in our approach, caring in serving the public. We're trying to build trust, and I think we have made some considerable inroads in that in the past 18 months, and look to continue to do that, and Rob will explain much of that as he goes through the points in terms of where we've been and where we're going. So with that, I'll turn it over to Rob.
Thank you, Mayor and City Council. Apologize in advance. I'm probably going to start walking around. I don't really like podiums, but I was told I had to use it, so there we go. Just before I start, when we took over this task, and as we talked to our staff this morning, this afternoon, as the staff, we are immersed in the activities day to day. And as I was putting this presentation together over the last week or 10 days, I really got a great appreciation, and I hope you will too, for what the staff accomplished. Not only were we able to win them over in kind of the leadership philosophy that we have at Public Works, but they have accepted a lot of that with a very positive attitude, and we have nothing but a bright future in Fred, in my opinion, as to wanting to make many of the changes that you guys have been hoping to see for a long time. This slide here, I will just tell you, the slide, the handout I provided you is to allow you to take notes. Some of the text is fairly small, so if you'd like, please contact me. I can either send you a larger scale version, or if you'd like to discuss issues one-on-one, be a little more in-depth, I'd be happy to do that. But I'm just, in the interest of time, I'm just going to try and gloss over several of the things. There are 2 times during the presentation where I'll stop for questions, but certainly if there's something you need clarification on, just stop me. Fred and I took over the division May 22nd, 2017. I remember the afternoon well. And over the following 4 to 6 months, we really tried to immerse ourselves in the operation and identified a variety of different issues. These were the major issues we identified that we knew we needed to take care of both in the short and long term. The first issue was staff related, and what the council should understand is we were involved with about 11 different staff changes in community development alone over the course of a year and a half. So just briefly, I'll just walk through some of those changes. The first one was the community development retirement in May. Director Vogt and myself split up those activities based on what our understanding of her role was. As you see, Fred served primarily as the planning and zoning liaison, along with other kind of big picture departmental responsibilities, whereas I took over more the day-to-day activities, permitting, inspections, budget-related items such as that. Shortly after that, within 4 or 5 months, our administrative services coordinator, long time, over 20 years at Public Works, retired. We did a job search. We found an excellent internal candidate, who you all know is Elizabeth Payne. When we filled that position, we had some internal discussions fairly quickly, and we decided that we were not going to fill that position, just backfill it with another secretarial position. We wanted to evaluate what the needs of the division were long-term, which you were all aware of. And in doing that, in creating that administrative services coordinator position, we were also involved in succession planning for the department as a whole, so we redefined that position to provide more oversight over both divisions, to kind of take advantage of kind of shared responsibilities. Shortly after that position took place, the permitting coordinator, again, a long time, over 20-year employee serving in that role, retired. We promoted an internal candidate that had worked side by side with that employee for many years. Excuse me. And again, redefined that position as licensing coordinator, redefined the permitting coordinator position. And then when she vacated that position, we again went through a hiring process where we hired another, at the time, part-time employee to go full-time as the licensing clerk position. And that happened in May of 2018. So clerically especially, and from a leadership perspective, there was a lot of changes that were occurring over our first 6 to 8 months in our position. Shortly after that, again, as I mentioned, in January of 2018, Fred and I took on building a sustainable succession plan that tried to develop tried to focus on employee development, encourage employee growth, and encourage getting people ready to take over positions as people retired. As we went through that process, Fred and I realized that we had several people in the department that were probably good candidates to serve in a leadership role in community development. By May of 2018, we had identified Superintendent Wenzel as really the best candidate that we had in-house to serve that role. And in June of 2018, that's when he started to try and work in community development on a regular basis to try and learn the operation, try and understand what the issues were, and from his own perspective. And shortly after that, we hired, as you are all aware, we hired 2 clerical positions. And about 4 months after that, one of the positions, one of the people resigned for another job opportunity. After that, or during May of 2018, we had a public works employee that had an injury, had interest in employee growth and development in the inspection field. We were able to comply with the light duty requirements and get that person involved in community development. It was a great help, and it really proved to us, it was kind of a nice little case study, that as long as we had people in public works that had an interest in that responsibility, we could utilize those resources during high peak demand times. For example, summer months when we have a huge influx of property maintenance issues, we can use some of those resources as needed. And then more recently, November-ish, late November, early December, we made a decision to refill the secretarial position that was vacated in January of 2018 with a building and engineering inspector. Again, all these new positions, the job descriptions were redeveloped. Building and engineering inspector not only serves community development division, but also serves public works, in that we're taking some of those responsibilities away from superintendents. So they're actually doing the permit reviews and inspections on smaller private projects related to engineering and building. And then again, the part-time clerical position that was recently vacated, we hope that that new employee will be starting next Tuesday. So for the first time since May of 2017, all the positions that were originally funded will be filled, which is an exciting thing for us. So some of the items that we identified, I'm going to try and go through real quickly, but communication and I'll refer to it as the division because it is now a division of Public Works. Some of the items in the division that we needed to work on were communication and morale. At the time when we took over, we were finding that the staff was really unaware of things that they really should have been aware of. So we started to incorporate, at first, weekly meetings, since changed it to bi-weekly meetings. Our inspection staff meets every morning to talk about the day's activities, plus they also have weekly safety meetings where they talk about safe work practices. The city's division staff had never been given our city's weekly report that we provide to you all, so they can get an understanding of what's being talked about. So we provided that. And we also have a much better representation at our biweekly engineering meetings from CD, as it's now our division, so we can make sure we stay on top of permit-related issues as they relate to the engineer. The morale issues, I'd like to believe that it's night and day right now, and really that's a good description. When Fred and I took over, the division felt dreary for lack of a better word. There was not a lot of bouncing anyone's step. They weren't happy to be at work. There was a lot of feeling that they weren't valued by the city council, the residents, or the community as a whole. We really worked really hard to change that narrative and really express that they do have value. They are here for a good reason. We are supportive of what they do. We just need to work on kind of improving how we do those things. Excuse me. Again, I'll just keep going through these items. Again, when Fred and I took over, there was pretty obvious that there was a lack of leadership in the whole division. We've tried to work on those things from a variety of standpoints. Originally Fred and I tried to split the duties and at the same time split our time. So we always had somebody in an authority position in the building. It wasn't very easy, but we did it for about a year. Also, when we redefined the administrative services coordinator position, we gave that position supervisory responsibility for the entire clerical staff in both Public Works and Community Development. What we are hoping to do is to continue to cross-train people so people can work in both areas based on need. And then lastly, and most importantly, reassigning Superintendent Wenzel has just been a breath of fresh air because he has really taken hold of that position, kind of grabbed the bull by the horns, and the staff. Both Fred and I have been stopped recently and thanked for Don being put in that position. So we're really getting positive results from that. The other thing we noticed, there was a lack of personal accountability. People were not given the authority to make decisions that you all are paying them to make. Decisions were being held up. We were creating a lot of unnecessary red tape for ourselves. The other thing is there was a lack of leadership and a lack of being able to bounce something off or talk about a decision that they weren't comfortable making, so they were making inconsistent decisions. One inspector would say something was okay, the other inspector would say it wasn't. And so now that we have that resource in the middle to kind of act as a go-between to make sure that when we do say something, it's consistent, that again goes to providing a consistent message to the public. A big thing that I noticed, and being there more often initially, there was a really big issue with segregation of responsibilities. Everyone had their own little yard that was fenced in, and they stayed in their yard, and there was not a lot of learning and helping and assisting outside of their primary responsibilities. So we're doing a lot of things to kind of change that. We've begun cross-training. We actually just spoke about it today. We're going to start getting our clerical staff occasionally out with inspectors so they understand better what contractors are looking for when they're scheduling inspections. We're going to have our inspectors serve with the clerical staff, so when they are at a meeting and they go out to lunch, we have coverage, and it's not just coverage of someone writing down information on a Post-it note and come back in an hour. We're actually serving them at that moment. We're also redefining every job description that we revise as a result of turnover. We're redeveloping it so it reflects shared responsibilities. A good example is the permitting coordinator and the licensing coordinator. If you look at those job descriptions, the first 12 are specific to their job. The next 12 are the other person's job. So they serve both roles. And that attitude has been shared across the board, and they're very accepting of those changes. So now we get out of personnel issues and we start talking about reasonable expectations. We had to talk internally about the difference between what people expect and what's realistic. And just some of the things we run into, the first one I wanted to note, because it was brought up by our staff several times, that as you as council people know, many times we hear from permit applicants, or when our inspectors go on the site, and I just heard from a guy today, very often they'll say, well, my alderman said that if it doesn't pass, just give me a call. And so we know that's not the case. We know that. But our goal, and you'll hear us talking about it throughout, is our goal is to fix things so you guys have enough confidence in us and our process that when somebody says that something to you, your comment is, that doesn't sound like staff. That doesn't sound like how we do things, but I'll look into it. And we want to encourage that to continue, but as we've talked internally, we realize that because we don't have realistic expectation, we don't hold true to them, and they're not consistent, you as elected officials, city manager's office, and residents, they don't have the trust that we're doing things the best way we can. So we're working towards that. The other thing is, again, elected official and city manager follow-up. I feel like we've gotten really good at that from what it's been in the past. The director and myself still want to serve as a conduit between you all and staff. And then one other thing to note is I would be remiss if I didn't point out the business advocate has been a great assistant to us in helping us separate the difference between being an advocate for business and being a regulatory agency. And so we work closely with her to try and make sure we're on the same page when these things happen, which hopefully has resulted in less complaints to you all. Again, we talk about establishing consistencies. These are things we're doing right now. One thing that the city manager will even tell you, many times complaints regarding permit submissions are a result of incomplete information or applications that haven't been filled out right. We're working really hard to develop a consistent requirements, and we're also working on revising all the forms, which you'll start to see those in the near future. We're just right now working on a lot of them, but we're working on a lot of them at once. And the things we've talked about internally, you know, I use as an example, when my son was about 2 years old, he got his elbow pulled out of socket, and we took him to the emergency room, and he was screaming, like screaming. And the nurse made us sit down and give the insurance information, and we couldn't get out and get treated till we gave all the information that was required. And that's what we've talked about staff. We are not going to accept an application unless everything that's necessary to get that permit moving through our system has been completed. And so, just so you all know, we may be turning people away because they want to turn in the application, but the plans are on the way later, and that's just not going to happen. When you try to circumvent the process, if the process is good, you never gain time. You always lose time. So we're going to hold people to our process. And one of those things is plan reviews. Again, in the past, inconsistent message. One person would say it's a 5-day turnaround, the next person would say it was 3, the next person would say it was 10. All of our permits, just so everyone knows, all of our plan reviewers get 10 business days to review the permit, to review the plan. There's 2.5 days at the front end and 2.5 days of processing. So if I submit for a single-family home, in 15 business days, I should expect to get comments back. And then every subsequent review after that is 10. The reason we do that is if I'm an applicant and I turn my plans in at 3 o'clock on a Friday, and they don't get to the plan reviewer's desk till 2 o'clock on Monday, and then he doesn't send them out to the plan reviewer till end of day Monday, and they get it Tuesday, we still have to give our plan reviewer 10 days to review it. By contract with outside consultants, and internally, we have to be respectful of the time that people have other responsibilities. So 10 days is a reasonable time frame. It's consistent with many communities who are in similar situations as us. But for now, we're holding true to that review period time for every project, regardless of the size. Again, consistency, we'll just talk a little bit about over-the-counter permits. We used to do over-the-counter permits for certain projects that really shouldn't have been over-the-counter permits. The big example is fences. They would be done over-the-counter, and the next thing you know, they'd go right through a drainage easement and block off drainage to a whole subdivision. And we couldn't do anything about it because we approved the plan. And so we're eliminating we're eliminating entirely 5-day permits. We don't have the staff to meet expectation. As I say in the slide, if you create an unachievable expectation, you end up with a frustrated customer, which then turns into a frustrated employee, and then that's where you get bad customer service. But again, we are looking to reintroduce over-the-counter permits that are better prepared, easier for residents to maneuver, and actually can get processed quicker. So those over-the-counter permits are not going away entirely. We just need to refine them and make sure we're issuing over-the-counter permits for the right types of projects. Excuse me. Again, this will be brief. I know it's a big, long slide, but we just talked about improved efficiencies. We have, I think, the first 3 or 4 items. Again, when I talked about giving ownership to employees, those were historically given to the director and could have sat there for weeks before they were approved. Now, employees look at what's been submitted. If they are okay with it, they approve it themselves. So huge amounts of time are saved there. We've also developed a water meter application. In the past, it was possible for somebody to get into a building or a unit or a tenant space or something like that without putting in a meter, and we had no way of knowing it. So they could have been there for months getting free water, and we had no way of knowing. So now what we have is a meter process which requires them to pay for and install the meter prior to an occupancy being issued. So that's very helpful. Little library handouts, I mention it because I know most of this council went through that process, and I think it was Alderman Badger who provided some input on how we should do those. Elizabeth Payne developed a really nice handout, which we hope to use as a model for future quick over-the-counter permits, where there's conditions on the back side of it and a real quick, easy permit application, so they get their permit, they get an inspection, and they go. Again, inspections and code enforcement, a lot of those improvements are internal. Again, we're creating more realistic expectations. The improved morale of the staff is resulting in improved customer service. We're noticing that every day. Our staff is not as overwhelmed, I should say. We have better direction. We're developing better processes, so there's less of this stressed feeling, and so the customer service has increased dramatically. And that's that one. Next slide, a few more. We've tried to do in Public Works and Community Development is we've tried to consolidate a lot of the duties and activities. Again, these are just brief. Payroll is now central. We all use the same forms. We have one person who processes all the payroll. We have one person that's reviewing all the payroll, much better oversight. Inspections, big problem when I started here, all the superintendents would complain about it. We would do a sanitary service inspection, and we'd end up with 3 inspectors out there at one time. And so that's almost eliminated entirely. One inspector goes out to do the inspection. If they need assistance, they can call, but otherwise, it's one and done. Plan reviews, again, we're establishing more consistent processes. We developed an inspection report. I didn't have photos, but prior to Fred and I taking over, there were like 3 or 4 different kind of inspection reports. We paid different fees for different ones. We now have centralized those into one form that the entire staff uses. It makes it very consistent for builders and developers. They understand what the forms are for and what they mean. And again, just inventory, office supplies, economies of scale. There's cost savings and staff time savings with that. Last one, I think it's the last one, is the improved efficiencies with the planning and zoning. You know, Fred and Elizabeth have done an amazing job at giving developers a real process to follow. When I started here, I would ask, what is our process? And I never could get a real answer. Our process now can be repeated to every developer, regardless of what their project is. We know exactly what they're doing, or they know exactly what they're doing. We're establishing appropriate cash advance requirements so we don't take a project through all this stuff, incur all these expenses, and have no money to show for it or no way to cover those costs. We've established a site plan review board, which is made up of basically the departments in the city, where we review the plans before it goes to Plan Commission. We create a comprehensive list of concerns that we can provide the developer. That's why they're not getting them piecemeal. They're not getting argumentative information from, like, the fire department has a problem, but the police department has a different problem, where they lead them in different paths. That's been very beneficial. And lastly, GIS layer has been developed that identifies PUDs and special uses, which again helps developers in the future, which allows them to understand what we've allowed in the past. Okay, just quickly, these are the improvements on the horizon. This slide you probably have more interest in than all the other ones combined. This is what we're hoping to tackle over the next year, 12 to 18 months. The items on the bottom are more the long-term items. The items on the top are more the short-term. We've already started probably 5 of the top 6 items. We hope to have those done sooner than the time period shown, but those are just rough estimates. The one thing I wanted to note when we talk about improvements on the horizon, our priority as a division is to change the narrative of our division. These are all really important things, but if the community doesn't trust that we're here to help them, they're all irrelevant. And so what we want is we plow snow after a big snow event, and we get 3 slides of compliments. We need to try and create that opinion of the community development in the community. That's our main priority. These are measurables. That's the immeasurables. So, and the last slide before I move on, I know this was all gone through really quick, and there might be some detail you have questions about. As we do with Public Works, we will want to offer to any alderman, if they have a desire to kind of job shadow us for a half a day, up to a half a day. I don't think you'd want more than a half a day. Feel free to let us know. We already have some ideas in hand of how we could kind of give you a good taste of the whole division in a short period of time. So please let us know if you have any interest in that. So that's my breaking point for that kind of the operational stuff. If anyone has any questions, let me know. Otherwise, I'll just plow ahead.
Plow ahead.
Okay. I'll be quick. This will be quicker.
Plow ahead, and we'll save it all for the end.
Okay.
Go quickly, because we'll be back with more of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. In that first slide, you noticed that there were 2 areas, kind of short-term and long-term. One of the long-term issues that we need to address is the comprehensive fee schedule, and I brought this up as a point just to show you how important this issue is to the whole operation. Getting a comprehensive fee schedule revised. Right now, the way the fee schedule's set up, I could have all 3 of the inspectors process a permit and get 3 dramatically different fees. And developers, builders, they can't look at our fee schedule and get an idea of how much their permit's going to cost. And us as staff, cannot answer the question. If someone says, hey, how much is my permit going to be about? I have no idea. And this is just an example. So I'm going to go through this relatively quick, but if you look, this is our current permit fee in the current fee schedule, city code. This is our current electrical permit fee.
Wow.
There are 44 different electrical permit fees. What we're proposing is this. That one single fee takes care of everything that you saw before it. So, and we plan on doing that with building permits, mechanical permits, plumbing permits. The same problem exists across the board. I don't need to look at my notes for this part. Permit fees are generally confusing, but just so everyone understands, most permit fees most permits that get issued should have 3 fees associated with them: a permit fee, an inspection fee, and a plan review fee. There's a permit fee that's just the general permit, the general cost of doing business, basically, the overhead costs, the cost of computers, the electric, gas, all those kind of things. That's your permit fee. And then you have the comprehensive permit fee, which includes that fee, the cost of inspections, and the cost of plan review time. So just quickly, the way our current fee is structured, if someone came in for a 250 square foot deck, valued at about $3,000, this is, typical construction cost, our current fee would be $92 permit. And what we're proposing is a $180 permit. And the reason is our inspections cost $55 per inspection, whether we do it or whether we farm it out. That means on this permit, not even including the plan review and overhead costs, we lose $73 just on that one single permit. The next example is a fire sprinkler, where we don't really get involved with the exception of processing and potentially site visits, things like that. Right now, our consultant charges $1,200 for their services, and we charge $25. $25 doesn't even pay for a person for a half an hour. And so what we'd be proposing is increasing it slightly. Again, we're not going to make money. The goal is never to make money. It's to try and come close to breaking even. And that's what this would do, is would come closer to breaking even. And this is just a fee example of the city over the last 8 years. As you can see, most years the city loses money in relation to the money we spend in community development for what we collect. Again, we're not trying to make money. We're trying to break even. We're trying to cover our costs. And that's one of the big problems with our current fee structure, is we are subsidizing way too many permits and way too much of the improvements that go on. And that's it. Sorry.
Not too bad.
I didn't think it was that bad.
Thank you. Mr. Vogt, do you have something?
Just one thing I wanted to add, as Rob finishes on fees, Mayor and City Council, you will all see these coming forward in the upcoming weeks, months, in terms of what staff is going to propose. We'll try to make that as comprehensive as we can, but certainly that's for discussion either in the committee format or when we present ordinances to be adjusting these. And as Rob said, that is a process that will take several months to complete, but one of our objectives to do throughout 2019.
Thank you very much. I just have a couple of comments. When I first came on the council, before that, I was given that invitation, so I have job shadowed. I think I've gone through the Citizens Public Works Academy 3 times. I've spent times in the summer where just put on the gear with the guys and, gone through what's happening in the roads and the streets. So it is quite amazing when you see what's happening out there during the summer. I haven't quite made it to the snow plowing. That's the challenge I was giving, to see if I could stay up all night with one of your guys and in the truck snow plowing. But
you're all welcome.
If you could do it when the temperature's about 60 degrees, and that would work out fine. But no, I just want to say that it is amazing, and I would, to my colleagues, if you haven't had the opportunity, if you don't want to do it during the winter, at least go out there during the summer and ride along with there were a couple different folks. I had Dwayne back down there, and I had a couple other, Don Wetzel. We sat down and talked to him. But I just want to make a few comments. Mr. Cannon and I had a conversation downstairs in front of a community development, I don't know, it was 7-8 months ago. And we were talking about the fact is, wouldn't it be easier how we could make it a little more friendly? And we got some tables put up downstairs, and it's every time because I'm in City Hall just about every day, and there's now tables up there, and I see people and contractors who used to say to me, I have no place to work if you ask me to fill something out. So I think that was really, it's the little things that make us more friendly. Don Wetzel, we're going to come up with a fireman's award for those of you who haven't met Don. Don is, big, tall, walks with a big stick, but has a calm voice. And I will tell you that I don't know how many times we have met out in the community when there's a new business coming in or new manufacturing, and all the staff is out there, and we're trying to resolve how can we help you move into the city. And then we've had times where people have challenges with our community development department, and I'll get a call later on and said, I don't remember his name, but he was a big, tall guy, and he was very nice, and when he left, I felt better. So I think Mr. Wetzel needs a pat on the back for that. So I just wanted to say that I have seen, and the department knows that I've been very involved with you guys, especially the last 6 or 8 months with the number of new businesses that we are coming forward. And I do see some positive steps there, because I also get calls, which I channel through you, and a lot of times I find out that the challenges that people are having, yes, it is our fault sometimes, but on the other hand, it's information that was not completely filled out on their side. So, questions for staff? Mr. Cannon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A couple of questions I have. First one would be, as looking at all your information up there, it looks like we're heading in some great directions, and I compliment all you guys for putting it together. I know it's a lot of work from all of you there. So thank you for that. Question is, how about things, emergency things? I have a water heater that broke. Can they get a permit the same day? Is that possible?
Yeah, our goal, right now, we haven't eliminated those permits. We want to make them better, but I kind of brushed over it, but in the slide, the over-the-counter permits would be emergency-related, generator, furnace, sewer repair, water leak, anything that we can think about emergency-related, or if it's something we can do easily, we want to do the over-the-counter permits. It's much easier for us if we can do it. The problem is we had a little bit right hand didn't know what the left hand was doing. We were dealing with drainage problems in the field, and in community development, we were issuing fence permits that were creating drainage problems in the field. So now that we kind of see things from 5,000 feet, we realize that's something we don't want to do in the future.
So Alderman Cannon, just again, for water heaters, when people do call and say that we're installing, that's the notification that we're looking for. Then come in and get your permit, because we do want to service, obviously, HVAC. I got no heat, and those are the things. But it's when a group comes in, doesn't ever notify us, and then it's catch me if you can, that's the issue. But when people notify us, and there are quality contractors out there, they'll give a call and say, I'm coming in for the permit, I had to do that's what they're looking for. So.
Okay. I guess the other question I would just ask, it looks like you guys did obviously a lot of work and made a lot of decisions. But the question I would ask is, does anybody pursue what's the best practices of this business overall? Do we check out people who are considered the leaders in this business in, maybe a competing city, for instance, that's really got a great reputation? Have we looked at any things that they're doing?
I was going to say, tell me the community development department that's got a good reputation.
Ones that do better than us reputation.
It's kind of like water billing. No one likes to get a water bill.
No.
The goal of our division right now is to question everything and to evaluate everything. And if we don't feel like we have experience, I come from out of this community. Elizabeth Payne comes from out of this community, both working in other community development departments. City clerk worked in a community development department in another community. These are all the resources we're using to at least say, well, why can't we do it that way? and try to incorporate, but the answer to your question is absolutely. We ask as many people as we can. Our interest is not being a unicorn in this. We want to be in the herd. We want to be doing things similar to everyone else, because if we are, what we hear less of is, well, Arlington Heights doesn't require that, and Palatine lets me do this. And if we know that we're doing the same things those communities are doing, then we're good.
Yeah, we also have
I look forward to having all these things implemented, so it's got to be good for all of us.
we certainly also have a staff network that we've developed over the years with working with neighboring communities and others, or where staff has worked in other communities, and we don't hesitate to reach out to them or sometimes go online and just get information that way in terms of what their processes and procedures are. So we're always looking to try to learn from others, because some people are doing it right.
Thank you. Further discussion?
Piggybacking on what Mike said, you might want to check with some contractors, some smaller plumbing, electrical contractors who pull permits on a regular basis in multiple towns, and they might tell you, like, different cities, Elmhurst does a really nice job, Highland Park sucks. I mean, whichever it is, I mean, depending on which town it is,
I agree.
they can tell you right out, and I know of pulling permits, I can tell you which towns I'd much rather do work in than I wouldn't, and Rolling Meadows is, in that mix someplace.
Yeah. No, I agree. And as I said before, that's been the big push, that's that kind of immeasurable that we've talked about, is a comfort level for every staff member to be able to say, I don't like how we're doing this. Why is this process so convoluted? We can make this better. And wherever you need to go to find that information, we're open to it. Right now, we are, our philosophy is if we're doing something today that we were doing 5 years ago, we're behind. So our attitude is we need to be changing everything all the time. The problem is what's happened, there hasn't been a lot of change, so everything needs to be changed, completely overhauled. We're not making minor tweaks and improvements. We're changing everything dramatically. So we're open to everything.
So, Mr.
And if I could, kind of to go back to Mr. Cannon's question about looking at other communities, we've just started to discuss ways that we can kind of gauge our successes with surveys. We've done this for many years in the Public Works Department, with particularly with underground utilities and refuse, where we've mailed out cards weeks, months later after service requests were done to gauge how we've done, where we can improve. We're going to look to do the same thing in community development, whether it's at the counter, whether it's follow-up mailings later on. I think with residents, businesses, and contractors, perhaps we'll figure out some ways to do that, to get feedback, and that's very important to find out areas where improvements are still needed. So we'll be working on that in 2019 as well.
And I do want to reiterate, if you do have some of those municipalities, you can let us know which ones. But what Public Works Director Fred Vogt, we also want to make it standard, so it's not specific for community development. We're trying to keep it in-house with Public Works questions that we already had. So it's some of the feedback that we're getting, but again, we are answering the telephones. We know how that goes. It's some of the other feedback that we're looking for, and that's what these additional surveys / over-the-counter questions that we're trying to develop in the context of questions that we already ask in Public Works overall, to get some of that feedback and additional comments back.
Thank you, gentlemen. It's been a slice.
Thank you all. Thanks for your support.
Thank you. We now move forward to 2018 Economic Development Summary. I'm not sure if Barry's starting it off, Martha, or...
I'm actually just going to do a quick intro, and now IT has changed the PowerPoint. So you have a very brief PowerPoint. It just takes the write-up and actually mention it. And obviously, many of you around the table are used to me doing a full detailed. This time it's business advocate Martha Corner who's going to do it. We did do the breakdown by wards, as we were asked a few years to do. Alderman Banjer, you're a little bit behind on getting a new business in there. You had 0 last year. But we do want to, in this presentation, highlight the businesses that moved in, and also some of the ideas and some of the businesses and some of the concepts that we're currently working with for 2019. I would make one final comment before I turn it over to Business Advocate Martha Corner, is that Z's Cafe, as of Monday, they are changing their name, Isabella Cafe. It's named after one of the primary Anthony Donato, or, Donato restaurant group that you've given, obviously, a liquor license, and you're coming back for some other pieces. That's his oldest daughter's name. So that is one change on the sheet. Amish Farmer, we are looking at a February opening, but with that, I do turn it over to Business Advocate Martha Corner to go over a quick PowerPoint and some of the sheets that are in front of you.
Thank you, Mr. Crumstock. First, I would like to say that as a business advocate for the City of Rolling Meadows in its first year in entirety, it has truly been a pleasure to work with the team here at the city. I've worked with other municipalities in economic development capacities, and I can honestly say that it is very pleasurable to get things done in this work environment. It's really been a great team to work with. So that being said, I'm going to move forward with the summary of what's happened in 2018 with the new team. Each year, new business numbers vary depending on economic conditions, other variables, availability of space, again, a number of conditions. But to highlight 2018, we did have some visible openings, including Reps Place on Kirchhoff Road. I'm sure everybody knows about it and has been there. It's been a great addition to the energy of the Kirchhoff Road corridor, which many consider to be the heart of the community. Dunkin' Donuts relocated from a strip center further east to a freestanding building along Algonquin Road, and that's been a great project to see through. It has had its hiccups, as with many projects that occur in Rolling Meadows. Rolling Meadows is a developed community, so with each new business opening, whether it's an existing space in an older center, even a demolition of an existing building, or new construction, it being an older community, there are many issues associated with code updates, infrastructure reconfiguration, etc. So every project is inherently an adventure for everybody involved. So Dunkin' Donuts opened on Algonquin Road. Jersey Mike's reused in a former coffee shop with a drive-through. It's the first Jersey Mike's in the Chicago area to have a drive-through. That's on Algonquin Road, Gulf Road. Pita Pita is now along Gulf Road in front of the Myers. That's in an outlet. 1219 Gulf Road. And Northwest Community Hospital opened an outpatient center on Rolling Road in Euclid, which again, it was a reuse of an existing space, adapting it for their current medical technology and office uses. It was a good project, and again, public-private collaboration to be had by all. Well done. Moving forward to new businesses that we expect in 2019. Some are under construction, some are very into the permit process, others are proposed. Key projects are the Aloft Hotel redevelopment, which is the Holiday Inn at 3405 Algonquin Road, which will become a new hotel under a new flag, the Aloft concept, which is very exciting, kind of a forward-leaning business model and decor. Daisy's Cafe is under construction at 3334 Kirchhoff Road. And again, that's one of the second video gaming facilities that's currently coming online. And we can talk a little bit more about that later. Fuller's Car Wash, demolition of existing building, new construction along Algonquin Road is going to be opening soon. Let's see, school health is a major project, well over 100,000 feet of new construction along the Jane Addams Tollway, including warehouse and corporate office space and spec lease space at 5600 Apollo Drive. Well before I came to work for the city, there was much afoot with the reconfiguration of drives, access ways, et cetera, within that golden triangle. So we can see that coming to fruition with the attraction of school health corporate location. Tesla is adding 10 additional charging stations to their current location along Meyer Drive in front of Myers. That speaks to the success of innovative technologies and, again, the faith and confidence that investors have and continue to have in the Rolling Meadows market. So that should be appreciated. Specifically to the business advocate position and goals for economic development, broadening with the City of Rolling Meadows as it's begun to, emphasize business friendly community, business supportive community. The Business Messenger quarterly newsletter has been through its first full year of publication. It's a quarterly publication. Residents in the viewing audience may not be familiar with it because it is only mailed to business and commercial property owners in the city of Rolling Meadows. The material is specific to the business owners, including new businesses, events, infrastructure projects, etc. And that has been well received by the business community. Another major goal of the expanded business support strategy for the City of Rolling Meadows is the Business and Community Showcase. The first was held in April of 2018 at Rolling Meadows High School. It was open to all businesses in the community to participate for a very minimal fee, actually almost gratis, of $10 a business, and open to the public free of charge. It was well marketed. We had approximately 40 business exhibitors and related affiliation exhibits, and approximately 500 public guests visited the event. This coming year, on April 25th, we've moved the location to the Meridian Banquet and Conference Center for a number of reasons. One, that it's actually a venue designed for conference purposes, and we hope to have a comfortable and a polished environment for both businesses and visitors alike. Planning is underway for that event, and again, that will be at a very nominal fee for businesses to participate and open to the public free of charge. Other aspects of expanded economic development in the city include the events and committees that continue to hold special events, that being the Community Events Foundation and volunteers for the events throughout the community. Laura did a nice summary a few weeks ago, so I won't go into detail on that. The Economic Development Committee continues to be very engaged and helpful with promoting economic development. During 2018, they were key in the implementation of allowing video gaming in the city, which has afforded many opportunities for new businesses and existing businesses to diversify their restaurant revenue streams. Providing financial incentives to new restaurants based on their sales tax revenue after a year of operation. And then also, very exciting that the Economic Development Committee has provided streamlined outdoor seating regulations for restaurants throughout the city. Excuse me, I'm sorry. The business retention and attraction function is something very specific to the business advocate. That is work in progress. One of the things that the business advocate does is to provide a face for the city as a first point of contact. As we kind of evolve with the position, the business advocate works hard to get answers and to provide feedback and guidance to prospective and existing business owners, working with the departments without disrupting their day-to-day operations. So that's been a worthwhile and ongoing experience. Other aspects of the business advocate position are to increase marketing for the city. In 2019, we expect to see that to continue with other programs and opportunities for marketing properties, et cetera. The comprehensive plan and zoning code update is underway. That began in 2018, and it's the comprehensive plan update should be completed during early 2019. Subsequent to that will be a comprehensive update to the zoning code. Both these efforts, insofar as it affects economic development, identify ways to improve the process for businesses to locate in the city of Rolling Meadows through streamlined codes, et cetera. And lastly, the available property list on the city website maintains current listings and continuously updated. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions, but again, I'm very pleased to have worked with the city team this past year.
Thank you for your presentation. Any comments? I mean, any questions? Was that you, Mr. Gannon?
Yes, sir. Could you tell me what's going on with Aloft? Are they actually, it looks like they liquidated the old building. I saw the furniture signs for sale. Are they actually in remodel yet?
You are correct. They did liquidate. They did do demo inside, and their permits are being reviewed. Most of it is by the outside contractors that we have, but...
Are they hoping to be open this year, or is that longer than that?
Well, let's put it this way. The Aloft organization, which is flagged by different parent company. They do need to be up and running by roughly June of this year.
They're part of Marriott, right? Is there, you're not supposed to say that?
I'm just trying to keep it vague, but yes.
Oh, okay. I know it's a big deal. Okay. And how about the Amish farmers? They've been in remodeling for
So
a year.
Amish Farmers is getting closer and closer to they are looking at a February opening at
Of
this
this
point.
year or next year?
This year.
Good question.
Okay.
Fingers crossed.
Thank you.
Great, thanks.
Ms. Matakis, did you?
No, I
have-
just said fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. Any other comments? Questions? Well, that being the case, I just have one comment. We were scheduled for a closed session tonight, but we were able to take care of that information, so we will be pulling closed session. All I need now is a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Mr. Banders made it. I have a
You were
second.
quick on that one.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We're out of here.